Toastmasters, ladies and gentlemen. Today I would like to share a little bit about me. I first got involved with public speaking about 8 weeks ago, and I've really enjoyed getting involved with it. Throughout my time growing up, I didn't really have that many opportunities that I took advantage of to public speak. The first time I started public speaking if you consider acting public speaking, I do, was in a production my junior year in The Curious Savages, and I played the role of the judge. I was terrified of going up in front of everyone and being on stage, but I did it, and it was awesome. So since then, I've been seeking out new opportunities to get involved. My senior year, I got involved with an MC position where I introduced people before they came on in a talent show, which was sort of strange because I didn't really know those little phrases to say before I introduced people, but I came up with stuff on the spot. Some of the things I thought were a little cliche, but it worked. Then my third time that I public speaked before taking my public speaking class was my freshman year, my first year of college, when I organized a potluck dinner for this community I was in, and that was really cool. So I'm going to talk about 3 things that I'm really interested in and that are important to me today, which are cross-country, one act, and my transfer experience. So I'm going to start off with cross-country. From cross-country, I gained a lot. I did cross-country all throughout high school, and I was the captain for 2 years, my junior and senior year. I gained leadership, perseverance, and ownership of my own effort. And I just want to say briefly a little bit about the 3. Leadership, I would say I learned a lot about how to lead by example and understand that if I'm not doing what it is I'm saying I'm doing or setting out to do, people aren't really going to follow me. And it may seem really simple, but it took those 4 years to really understand that. And then with perseverance, I learned that if I don't achieve my goal the first time, I can achieve it the next time, and that it isn't necessarily a race, even though it's cross country. Then the third thing is that I need to take ownership of my own effort. If I'm performing at a different level than my teammates are on my team, because that's how much I want to be putting in, then that's my responsibility. That isn't my team. It isn't my responsibility to make sure my teammates are contributing at a level that I think is okay for me. So those 3 things, leadership, perseverance, and ownership of effort, are what I got from cross country. Then my next thing I want to share with you is my One Act experience, which is a program at UNC in prevention of sexual violence, and it's an active bystander program. And in this program, I'm the membership coordinator, and I've learned a lot about just social justice and teaching other people how to stand up for themselves when they may think otherwise. So I've in One Act, it's a group of peer educators, and we train people in 3 to 4 hour sessions to learn how to be an active bystander at parties or just in everyday situations. And I've really enjoyed doing this work because it's what I'm passionate about, and I get to empower others to be the change. Then thirdly, I'd like to share my experience transferring. Transferring has been a great experience for me, and I had no idea how much work it was going to take to transfer schools. I thought the application process was going to be the hardest part, yet going to a new school was just like being in first year all over again. So that was really fun, and I learned a lot about how some things change and some things are still the same even if it's at a different institution. So I really took a lot away from that. Then just being on a new campus, I thought it would also be fairly different, yet there's a lot of similarities that I saw, such as college students are college students no matter where you go. And they all have that in common. Then I'm going to wrap up and say that I'm cross-country, one act, and my transfer experience really mean a lot to me right now, and I look forward to taking on new experiences as I go throughout life.
The VP of Education. As I take a look at my time here at Toastmasters, I was a wanderer. I was a former one-time misfit of reading books like this from Toastmasters that would tell you what different positions did. I just blindly came in and focused in on my speeches. It was the speaking part that I really cared about. Then somewhere along the line, I got nominated for club leadership. And so the question became, what do they do? What does this person really do as a job? Well, I'm here to partner with each of you to accomplish your goals. My assumption that we are all here to learn. It doesn't matter what your goals are. I'd say that most of us track down towards that competent communicator track in the communication series, but whether you are going after your first 10 speeches in the competent communicator, or if you're going after your next 10 speeches for advanced communicator bronze or silver or gold, or whether you're going up to the leadership track and you're thinking about how meetings are run, or how you can contribute to a group, or how you can assert yourself through the leadership manual, the VP of Education is the person that helps you match up those goals and get it done, to get it scheduled, to get you an active participant. The second part of what I'm up to is trying to bring fun to these meetings. As a leadership group, we've been trying to make certain that we keep things light, we keep things fun, and we try to loosen up a little bit. So that's the second part. How can I bring positive energy to the group? Now, built within the VP of Education's role, we really have four things. Coordinate the club schedule, which I'll be speaking more about. Assist with education awards. That's part two, making certain that we sign off on people and get them set up for whatever awards they've achieved, and that it's recognized from a national level from the Toastmasters International piece. The third thing that we do is we plan speaking contests. Didn't know that until this past weekend. I'll be telling you each more about that as we go. And then we manage the mentor process. We manage putting people together, even people that are experienced or unexperienced, new or old, with people that can help them achieve their different goals. Because we each bring some sort of strength to the table. Resources. No, my dog is not the resource, but my book is. And as you can tell, as in the past, it has put me to sleep too, and I thought this picture was appropriate. It's not the most exciting book in the world, but it has so much information. And there's so much available through Toastmasters about what my role is and what the roles are for the different officers that you can expect in terms of help. So I would encourage you to take a look at your Competent Communicator Manual, to take a look at your Leadership Manual, and take a look at who can help you. VP of Education, I'm going to, again, help you with that scheduling piece and the awards. Resource number two that I became aware of after not knowing what this job was all about was the Toastmasters International website and the Toastmasters Leadership Institute that I attended this past weekend. This past weekend, myself and 3 other of the leadership members went to a little training session that was from 8 o'clock until 12 o'clock and taught us more about our roles and gave us ideas. So I'm hoping that with this learning, I can bring to you the best in practice, best in breed type knowledge, so that we can all progress. Again, working on the assumption that we're all here to learn. Now, as an officer, one thing I'm going to show you is that the Toastmasters International website becomes more important. Each of you gets to go in when you first set up and you get to create an account. You pretty much just set up a profile, but when you become an officer, a new piece becomes available. It's this Club Central. This all of a sudden miraculously shows up and is where we can actually put in information about our membership. And I'm going to show you 2 pages here. And since we don't have a huge group of people here, we won't have quite the impact, but this is what, from an international level, Toastmasters thinks we're doing in terms of our awards. So, for example, Emily, there's no CC afterwards because you're just starting. For Tanya, I became aware for the first time that she actually has a CC. Take a look, if you see your name on there, this is what's showing up. Now this is the one with the bulk of them. We noticed that, for example, I have to submit an award for grading. That I have to submit an award for myself. That from an international perspective, it hasn't been done yet. And I'm not actually showing up as a competent communicator. You also notice that some people have multiple sets of letters, again, reflecting the fact that we have two different paths. We have a path for leadership and we have a path for communication. So what my goal is to make certain that our club is moving people through what their goals are, but to encourage both sets of goals. And so we're documenting both tracks, and we're moving people to the leadership track and the competent communicator track. Now, when I show this picture, I am reminded to tell you one of my favorite games at the house. What am I thinking? I will turn to my kids when we're having a tough day of, so-and-so looked at me, or she's looking at me mean and it made me sad, or whatever it may be. And I'll turn to them and I'll say, Hadley, Summer, my daughters, what am I thinking? And we'll play a game and we'll make it fun. And I'll sometimes even pull out money and say, what am I thinking? This can be yours if you guess right. Now this is a fun game with 6-year-olds and 8-year-olds, especially ones that are as cute as this. And can you guess right now what she's thinking? Brandon, any guess at all?
How much she loves her dad.
Not at all.
That's money.
No. She wanted ice cream. You'll never guess. And so I bring it up because each of you has something you're trying to achieve, but I can't read your mind. And it's not as much fun to play with you as a group as it is with my daughters. I need to know what you're thinking and what you're after in order for this to really work. My primary tool, you've seen this, it's going to be Google Forms. I'm going to be sending those out. I'm going to try to plan 8 weeks at a time. We have 4 weeks coming up. We're at 4 weeks, so another one will be coming out. And I'll get results and I'll schedule it. Miraculously, if you ask for it, a lot of people got exactly what they asked for. In summary, I'll put it on the website where you can see agendas, and that will determine what your spots are. Backup speakers will be probably from the next week, and we'll talk about that more later. In summary, that is what the VP of Education does. Thank you very much.
As I mentioned in my introduction, I did have the privilege of representing the AARP over several meetings at local churches in their effort to educate local churchgoers around key fundamental financial topics. And as we came through that deck, there was one section that I found particularly interesting, and I thought it would be worthwhile to share it with this group today, because it really affects many portions of our lives outside of just our financial work. It focuses around outsmarting investment fraud, but again, I believe these persuasion tactics are relevant across many aspects of our lives. There we go. Apologies for that hiccup. So when we look at financial fraud, we say, how big is the problem? How often has this occurred? Well, as we're all aware, recently we've seen many of these cases in the media, whether it be smaller cases, some of the bigger cases, Greater Ministries, Tom Peters, Stanford, and then of course Bernie Madoff. And I think Bernie Madoff is the one that really everybody has heard about because of the size of it, but also because of the sophistication of the people who were invested in Bernie Madoff. These were not mom and pop people. Very famous people, for example, the Wilpons, who owned the New York Mets, a baseball team. They were involved and victims of that. So again, it's not who you would think really becomes victim of these frauds. When you look at some of the research on persuasion, what you'll see is that it isn't just one little gimmick or one little trick that these con men use. Most of the time, they utilize multiple tactics. So for example, in investments, they're particularly sophisticated, using 13 different tactics. So what the AARP did is they went out to FINRA, which is a governing body of the investment community, and they got from them some phone calls of fraud tapes, and they analyzed them to see, well, what are they doing? How can we educate people better? And what they found is, looking at those, there's over 13 different tactics used in those calls on average to try and defraud people. What we're going to do today is take a look at 5 of them particularly. These were the 5 that were used most frequently. And the goal here is just to educate around some of these tactics so that if you perhaps are in a situation that something seems a little bit too good to be true, you might notice one of these tactics being utilized and be a little bit cautious about it. So what are the 5? Phantom riches, source credibility, social consensus, reciprocity, and scarcity. Before we start moving through them, let's take a little quiz. Victims of investment fraud have which of these characteristics? Female, no college education, below average financial literacy, live alone. Well, the answer is none of the above. In fact, if you look at the characteristics of victims of investment fraud, what you'll see is that you might not suspect this. They're typically male, they're typically around 60 years of age, they're somewhat financially literate than the average person, college educated, they may have had a recent change in financial health or status, they're higher income, and they tend to be risk takers. Now, many times when you hear about fraud, you hear about grandma or grandpa or certain vulnerable people, less educated people, but in the research that the AARP did on financial fraud particularly, this was the findings that they brought forward. So what are the key risk factors as it relates to financial fraud? If you own high-risk investments, if you're relying on friends, family, or co-workers for advice, if you're consistently open to new investment information, if you fail to check the background of your broker, and if you have an inability to spot persuasion used by conmen. So at this time, let's go through some of those persuasion tactics that they utilize. Learning to spot persuasion. Persuasion tactic number 1 is phantom riches. This is when somebody gives you something that's just way too good to be true. One place I always notice this is in the comment sections on the internet, where my cousin makes $72 an hour at home part-time on the computer. But you'll see this elsewhere as well, where somebody might promise you a 15, 20, 25% return on your money, very low risk. That might be thought of as a phantom rich tactic. Dangling the prospects of wealth, something you want but you can't have. Here's a second one, source credibility. When people tout themselves a little bit. While I have an MBA, a CFP, a CTFA, and I am also president of the local Rotary, so they try to impress you with their credentials to build their credibility. So source credibility is another tactic that you may see used when people really try to impress upon you how elite they are so that you might bring your confidence to them. A third one, social consensus. If everybody wants it, it must be good. With gas prices soaring, everyone is demanding alternative sources of energy. So really this is the desire to be with the crowd, to do what's hip. Reciprocity. Why don't you let me bring you out to lunch and we'll talk about it. And then when lunch is over, they say to you, well, now that you've enjoyed this great lunch, wouldn't you consider doing some business with me? So they're trying to say what they gave to you deserves a reciprocal action on your part. And scarcity. If something is rare or scarce, it must be more valuable. Well, you better buy it now because it's going out of production, it's going out of style. So now here's a great example of this, the home shopping network. Let's take a look at this. We have something here with a great deal, right? We have a great deal going on. Reciprocity. I'm giving you a great deal, you should take advantage of it. Social consensus. Look at this. Over 19,000 people have bought it. And lastly, scarcity. Cedar's gone, oak's gone, hickory's gone, but you can still have pine, but only for 29 seconds. So I think this was great because we all see this on TV and we don't really think about what they're doing, but it's definitely well thought. So I hope today that my comments on tactics around persuasion is helpful for you to learn to spot them yourselves. This is Toastmaster.
Great job to all our speakers, and thank you so much for that. I'm going to ask our timer right now if all of our 3 speakers qualify.
Opportunity to hear a first-time speech, an icebreaker. Everybody that's a member, existing member before today has done it, and we have 3 new members in the group. So there's a great opportunity not only for Connor, but for the other 2 new members to take note of what an icebreaker speech looks like and maybe pick up some tips as well. Connor did some things very well. I noticed right off the bat, he took control and had an air of confidence about it. Not an air of arrogance, but an air of confidence that I felt was appropriate. I also liked his voice. He got out and was able to communicate loudly and clearly to the group. That's critical. Another good thing that Connor did was he had good eye contact. I was at the slight disadvantage of trying to eat my lunch, look around the room, and look at him at the same time, but I did notice that he was making eye contact with people throughout his presentation. Excellent. And that's something I think we can all do. It's a skill that we need to learn sometimes, but he had it down well. He was well prepared for a speech. He projected into the audience. He used organization in the speech, which is, again, required in virtually any speech you're going to give, so he did that well. A couple of things I'd like to see improved. I found that the notes you were holding were a little bit distracting. So my comment, maybe I noticed they were on a colored piece of paper. For whatever, I'm a visual person. For whatever reason, that might drew my attention away from you and down to the notes because I could see the colored paper. Another thing was, now that I'm looking at them, they're also very small, and I understand the transition from a first-timer to being comfortable in your speeches in terms of using notes. Perfectly acceptable, by the way, in a first-time speech. Over time, you'll find that the less notes you'll need, the more you'll be able to use your body. So I think the notes also restricted you to a small space, which again, I don't usually comment on a first-time speaker very much because again, our main objective is to get to know you. And so that's the area I work on, is maybe putting your notes on a bigger piece of paper, lay them on the table so you can do other things with your hands as opposed to kind of comfort the notes a little bit. They don't need it. The only other recommendation I would make for Connor would be to get out and use your body more, which follows with what I just said. And one other recommendation, Connor gave a great background to us about his public speaking experience. He mentioned the 3 or 4 things. He was very organized in the 3 things that he wanted to bring to the table today, the 3 activities he'd been involved with that made a difference in his life. The only thing you could have added, and again, this is a short speech, so it's not that critical, maybe a little bit about your family history or background there. So overall, great job. Look forward to more speeches, and new Toastmasters, take note.
Thank you, Peter. Brian is a quantum coworker of mine at a communications company, so I'm going to be a little bit more strict with Brian today. But Brian is also in an advanced manual. And while you heard Peter give an evaluation of a first-time speaker, Brian has been through 10 speeches, and this is an advanced manual on speaking to inform. His second speech is using the resources in order to inform. So that's really the focus of this speech. How well did he use the resources to inform us? Brian's goal was to inform us on the topic of his role as Vice President of Education. As Brian went through his speech, he did well with organization. He did well with his resources. He even numbered some of them. He ordered resource number 1, resource number 2. He had really good transitions in there and said, now this is the one. While also informing us, he used great humor, not only in some of the visuals that he used with the visual of his dog sleeping while reading the manual, but the visual of his daughter adding some light and color to the commentary that he was giving us. He had a mixture of the informative with some of the screenshots of the websites for the visuals and the resources, and the humor, so I thought he did very well there. I'll have to give Brian props because he always does well with vocal variety, and things that I heard him do well on. When I asked him questions, he had a different tone, and then if you remember, he changed his pitch and his rate of his speech when he was talking about moving down that track, going from here to there to there to there, and he really felt like he was on a good, he felt like he was kind of steamrolling through that to cover a lot of material. So he did well with that. A couple of the points that I think Brian could improve on, in fact, I think just 3 points he can improve on. While we knew he was VP of Education, the first thing out of Brian's mouth in his intro was VP of Education. Now it was displayed on this as a title on his slide, but I think he could really enhance his title, either if it was in the introduction who he was, he could come out and give us more color on that to really draw us in as to perhaps why he's a VP of Education or why he's even telling us this. So I thought that the intro and the first words out of his mouth could be stronger, perhaps memorized. On his visuals, a couple of the visuals, while effective, were a little unclear, and I think the first one is a good example where he had the track laid out of the communications and the leadership track. The actual visual, which perhaps was a phone picture of a section of the book, was just too small. And for informing us perhaps of what those two are, it was really hard to get a sense of what the visual was actually talking about. Same with some of the website pictures of Toastmasters International and the forums. They're just a little bit too small, blow it up a little bit. And finally, I was a little bit lost on where we were. So on some of the visual slides, perhaps have a better description of the point he was trying to make at the top of each slide and maybe continue so we know where in that good organization we fell. Great job, Brian. A couple points for improvement, but as a quantum co-worker, perhaps we'll once again rejoin forces.
Barbie was a combination of Barbie, except instead of a playhouse, we have an office, and Monopoly. And so Business Barbie and I would go around and buy businesses and properties using Monopoly money. And I kind of, so as a child, I was an only child, so I didn't really get an opportunity to play games like they were designed. So I had to kind of figure out how to play games that I could play with myself and my imaginary friends at times. So that is where that's my favorite game as a child.
Wrong person to ask about fads because I don't pay attention to any of them. But, you know, I have the thought as I'm seeing a lot of things coming back that some of the old-fashioned games that people used to play, I think are going to start coming back because people are so surprised that they don't have to connect, use batteries, they can actually play a board game or play Barbie instead of put Barbie in a little car and drive around. So I'm hoping, perhaps because I'm really 150 in my head, that some of the fads that come back are Parcheesi and Sorry, and not the electronic version of it, but to see what we can find there.